like to call to order tonight's regular planning board meeting for September 17th, 2024. Quorum is present. I'd like to go ahead and move to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a vote on the agenda for this evening?
Can I motion to accept the agenda?
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving down, we have minutes for correction from the regular planning board meeting on August 20th, 2024. Did we have any corrections here for the record on the August meeting? Awesome. Seeing none, I'd like to go ahead and get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from August 20th, 2024, please.
Motion to approve minutes from August 2020.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Let's see here. We have general public comments. Let me double check with staff here. Being no general public comments, I'd like to go ahead and open it up. If anybody does have a general public comment, to go ahead and come to the podium now. Seeing no one rise, I'd like to go ahead and close general public comments. Moving past old business, being none. Going to item F, new business. We have the Atrium Waxhaw conditional rezoning petition CD 00005-2024. Tonight's presenter is Blair.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. This is, if I can get past all the extras here. Oops. Right. All right, hold on.
Bear with us as we have a little technical difficulty with our IT.
Okay, I think we're good. Thanks to Matt, our IT.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Blair.
All right, so this is the conditional rezoning petition for Atrium Waxhaw. Petition CD 405-2024 is a request by Waxhaw Associates, who's represented here tonight. It's a division of the Michaels organization, for a conditional rezoning and map amendment for parcel 0616209B located at 2700 South Providence Road, from Employment Center, which is EC, to EC conditional. The property is approximately 14.8 acres located adjacent and south of the Atrium Hospital Complex across from Bojangles. You can see it here in the video, and like we're standing, Atrium's over here to the right, and so you can see the property there. It's all trees right now. So here's 2700 South Providence Road, and you can See the Atrium Hospital there. I've turned on the different neighborhoods just so you can get a sense of what neighborhoods are nearby. The proposed Adelina neighborhood there and the existing Curitan neighborhood in its various phases. Again, you can see the hospital, you can see the helipad right next to it. This is some undeveloped property that is zoned NC. We'll get into the zoning a little more in the next slide. And over here is the Bojangles and Aldi and some more commercial down here, and the Curitan HOA. So getting more specifically into the zoning, you can see that currently it is the property is zoned employment center, and directly north, of course, is the Atrium Hospital, is also zoned employment center, and north of that. To the east, Adelina is a conditional zoning with conditional commercial in the front and residential in the back, and then you have straight commercial zoning, commercial corridor with those uses like Lowe's and such and Aldi. And then Curitan is all R3 residential. So that's the existing zoning. And our land use plan from Waxhaw 2040 Comprehensive Plan, it looks very similar. It hasn't changed much from this plan, with some exception, of course, where Adelina is. But our future land use plan, of course, is, I need to remind everybody that state law mandates that zoning be undertaken with consideration of a comprehensive land use plan, and that a consistency statement must be prepared and approved for every zoning amendment, including tonight. The recently adopted 2040 future land use map, shown here, or a segment of it, designates the property as employment center. And I just want to point out the principal uses, which you can see there: high-tech manufacturing, light industrial, research and development, warehousing, distribution, business and office, commercial kitchens, another example. These are just some examples of what are intended for employment center. Exclusive higher density housing developments are permitted only after excuse me, the employment uses are established. So getting more into the conditional zoning and why that's required for this particular development is that per Waxhaw Land Development Code, residential uses are permitted through, they can do it through a special use process, which is a quasi-judicial process, or as part of a conditional rezoning mixed use request, which we are here for tonight. Exclusive housing developments will not be considered until non-residential uses are well established in the employment center, as I mentioned. This page over to the right is from the Land Development Code, which gives more specifics about employment center. So this conditional rezoning would need to meet those conditions, but again, the reason for the conditional zoning is to also have the residential. Here you can see some details about buffers, which we can go back to if there's more questions about that. But since this is a conditional rezoning, it is a site-specific design. So you're not just making a recommendation about a rezoning, you're making a recommendation about a rezoning to a specific plan, a particular plan. Any major design changes that are recommended or required, they will be, it will need to have a revised submittal and another review to go through that. So it's a process. But this shows you the plan that was attached to the agenda packet, page 1, and I blew it up a little bit for page 2 so you can see a little bit more of the design and site data and all, but this was all in your agenda packet, so I hope you've had a chance to review the plan. I just want to point out, let's see, a couple of things. As connectivity will be a subject matter tonight, in some ways I want to point out that they show a connection to the NC property that's undeveloped right now through this stub. They show, of course, connections from the parking directly to the Atrium network of private streets here. And then they show a connection of both the existing road here, that's paved right now, and then this area is graded right now for paving, but they show that there would be street going in there, or a paved connection. So for staff recommendation, we do recommend an approval of the proposed conditional rezoning from EC to ECCZ, conditional zoning, contingent upon an unimpeded street connection through Bidwell Avenue to the Atrium Hospital Road network, in keeping with the Land Development Code requirements for street connectivity. So I've included the code that's pertinent, that has to do with street connectivity. It's all in section 7.2 of the Land Development Code. And I'll take a sip of water and then read through it very quickly. Section 721A, residential developments, so this pertains to the residential aspect of this project. All residential developments shall be required to connect to existing street stubs or provide stubs and rights-of-way to adjacent properties. Public right-of-way and access easements shall be dedicated to allow for future construction and connection of a street and sidewalks from the adjacent property. At a minimum, 2 functioning vehicular and pedestrian access points to at least 2 public streets of the existing public street system, not a stub out, is required for developments that exceed 100 residential units. And this development has 190 units, I believe. And then just 2 more short sections, and that's it. Non-residential developments, because in this plan, we didn't go through the plan in detail, but you could see the commercial development that's up front towards the road, and then the residential in the back. I should have kind of gone through the plan a little bit more, but hopefully you're familiar enough from the packet. But we can go to that plan whenever. Non-residential developments sites must provide street connections with all adjacent properties, taking into account the future development or redevelopment of these properties, or must provide an organized and complete street network with an emphasis on connectivity throughout the development and for future adjacent developments as so deemed by the zoning administrator. Non-residential, multifamily, or mixed-use development of greater than 5 acres, which this is, must provide an organized and complete street network with an emphasis on connectivity throughout the development and for future adjacent developments. And finally, on street arrangement, the proposed public and/or private street system shall be designed to provide vehicular and pedestrian interconnections to facilitate internal and external traffic movements in the area. Roadway connections shall be provided between the development site and its adjacent properties, with 1 roadway connection for each directional quadrant which the property abuts. So that's from the Land Development Code. So as for reasonable and consistency, the staff deems this request reasonable and in the public interest, this rezoning, as the parcel is adjacent to other existing EC properties and complementary and uses along the major road corridor, and will provide diversity to the tax base. So the fact that it's remaining an EC property is why we would say this. The request is consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future land use map in terms of land use, again, EC to just EC conditional, but is inconsistent with the Waxhaw 2040 comprehensive plan in that it impedes required connectivity. And so a quote, just a short one from the Waxhaw 2040 comprehensive plan, section 10, vehicular transportation goals. The goal is to alleviate traffic congestion throughout Waxhaw by improving street connectivity through future development. So these are the motions that are the choices for tonight. Motion to recommend with modifications, or a motion to deny recommendation. So questions, or if you like, I can go back to the plan for reference.
I take it the applicant is here this evening, Blair?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Awesome. I'm sure the applicant has some comments or presentation that they'd like to represent, and then we can go into questions. Is that okay? Thank you.
Stacey, Blair, I didn't know if you were gonna.
Yeah, hold on.
I'll go ahead and do introductions. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Bridget Grant. I'm a land use consultant with Moran Van Allen. Pleased to be here. It has a weird echo, sorry. Does that sound okay? Pleased to be here on behalf of Waxhaw Associates for the rezoning on Providence Road. So, I got it.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I will do my best to not duplicate anything that that Blair has presented, but do want to bring attention to a few things. As he mentioned, this is a portion of Atrium's site. We're purchasing a portion to the south of their existing property. It's just under 15 acres. As he noted, it's consistent with the adopted land use policy. We're building off of the existing uses. We tend to take a look at, when you're doing something like employment center, if we were to develop this by right under the existing zoning, if you were to do a fit study, we think you could get about 100,000 square feet of medical office uses. It would go through the traditional by right development option, so you would adhere to the ordinance standards, development would allow without conditions, and doesn't have the same level of community engagement. So when you go through conditional zoning, you're giving more certainty, and that's what we wanted to do through this process. We are seeking up to 40,000 square feet of medical office uses, and we are seeking to have up to 190 age-restricted units. The age-restricted part is in the conditional rezoning, so that's something that lives with the rezoning if it's approved. We went through extensive community engagement. We provide certainty on architecture and materials and certainty on the uses. This just shows our proposed conceptual site plan, taking into consideration future NCDOT plans to make sure that we did everything that would allow for any future plans to be implemented. So our buildings are far enough away from anything that would impact NCDOT's plan. Zooming in on this with a little more color, sometimes easier to read, you can see where we've got the two 20,000 square foot office buildings on the front of the site with the 40-foot setback and the 20-foot landscape buffer. And I think one of the things that Blair's mentioned is the gate that would prohibit access, impede access. It's really important to note, I don't know if this will work, this driveway here and here, those are not public streets. Though at times I think it might look like it if you were coming off of Gray Byron and going behind Atrium to the hospital and it looks like it should connect to Bidwell. It's actually private property. It's not designed to public street standards. It doesn't have a right-of-way over it. And so if someone were speeding on it, the police department can't control traffic just like they couldn't on anyone's private property. So we recognize that we are required, Blair's correct, to make a connection to and stub to public streets. And we've done that. We've stubbed to Bidwell as required by ordinance. The pavement that's here today is only there because it's a road that's required to get down to manage the stormwater management system that's there. So it's not technically a road. It's a maintenance driveway of sorts. And so we've provided the connection up to there. We've provided the connection into our site. But we have noted that we're providing a gate there. Atrium, for liability reasons and otherwise, doesn't want to create the illusion that this is a public street going through our site and through their private property to connect to Gray Byron or the other streets. I think that's a really important thing to recognize. When we were all looking at the connectivity on the front side, it seemed that it was a public street to public street connection, when in fact it's not. It's on the private hospital property. So we took another look at it, and given that there's not going to be likelihood for full vehicular connectivity, we recognize that pedestrian connectivity is incredibly important as we're growing in this region. So we've still provided a trail, pedestrian connectivity. We use the BMP as amenity with sidewalks around it. We still have to have this maintenance driveway to get down to the BMP. We've just maintained the gate there. What this also did was allow us to eliminate this connection from the parking lot down into the driveway. One of the things that active adult buildings sometimes do are gate off their parking areas just for the safety of the seniors that are living in them. If you have a chance to go visit any similar properties, you'll often find that they have pockets of gated parking that's an amenity for the residents. So I'm sure we'll spend a little bit more time on this, so I'll go ahead and hit a couple more slides. Again, the proposed zoning is consistent with the underlying zoning. It's providing a housing type for our aging population. It's the opportunity to age in place. It's people who are renting by choice, typically downsizing, but they want to stay within their faith community, their friend circles, stay close to where their kids are. It's providing that housing option. It provides medical space to complement Atrium and the growing medical needs in the area. That type of office is probably the only type of office that's still doing well in the office segment in this type of the cycle. It generates less traffic than the existing zoning during peak times because it's not traditional multifamily and it's not traditional single family. Age restricted communities tend to leave and have different peak hour times. They don't have to leave during rush hour traffic in the morning or rush hour traffic in the evening. Age restricted also means that there are no school impacts. And the rezoning includes architectural commitments that you wouldn't have with the by right development and some increased buffers. A little bit about age-restricted programming. I promise you I will not read all of this to you, but the idea is that it gives you resort-style amenities and services. There are a range of smaller apartment homes with modern features and finishes. There are offered opportunities for socialization, wellness. It still gives personal fulfillment and freedom to live independently. It's a great transitional use, something between downsizing from a single-family home but not quite being ready to go into assisted living or continuum of care. I mentioned the traffic considerations and trip generation. When we talked about there being 100,000 square feet of medical office uses by right, it gives you peak trips in the morning of about 241 trips and 404 in the afternoon. When you look at the ability to do this and include that age-restricted community, the morning total goes down to 141, about less 100 trips, and in the afternoon it goes down to 152. So it just gives you an idea of how traffic has changed just by the change of office to age-restricted housing. We've included a couple of elevations. We think it's really important for the office and the future multifamily to complement each other. I think that there's been a great attention to detail in the ordinance and what the quality and character of materials look like. The ordinance does a really good job of building on the type of architecture that we want to see in Waxhaw. We've added some additional conditions and we've included these elevations to give you an idea of the scale and massing, windows, openings, doors, and roof lines that you would expect to see. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there an example of a similar development that's nearby or that you guys have done or that we can look
Absolutely. Overture in Ray Farms is a great example of a community. It's I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but it's a relatively new building. Is it a couple years old? 3 or 4 years old, but it shows the type of amenity, pool, some of the gated parking. The building has amenity spaces, a full gym, a full movie theater, a game room. It's an impressive place to go.
Ray Farm has a age-restricted community?
In Ray Farms, yes. It's Ardrey Health, right?
Yeah.
The
It
side
is-
street.
I know where Ray Farm is.
Yeah.
I know the single-family homes and the multifamily homes, but I wasn't aware that there's something similar to this type of a multifamily unit there.
I was trying to think of the intersection on Audrey Kell. So it's when you're heading away from Providence Road on Audrey Kell. It's on your right-hand side. It looks.
It's still Audrey Gill all the way?
Yes.
Across Providence?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to have limited parking for, like gated parking for the residents that's separate from the parking available for the medical offices then?
That's correct.
So how does that, does that meet all the requirements as far as needed parking spaces, since you're going to have a kind of a segregated, kind of limited, enough for the apartments as well as having enough for the office buildings?
We haven't indicated that we're going to gate the parking for sure. And what they've typically done on other developments is just gate a small number of the spaces. Again, it's just an added extra amenity. So I'm pointing up here. It might be something as simple as just this area right here becomes gated, or potentially just an area on the side where it really doesn't impact your ability to meet all of the parking requirements for the medical office or either use overall.
So but the town kind of agrees with that you've got adequate parking for all the facilities in this development?
Well, that would be under review when we review the construction documents for the rezoning. I would think that we have enough parking there just by cursory review, but in the construction document phase, we would be sure that would be required.
I believe per our ordinances, based off of what I'm seeing here on the data analysis provided by the required parking would be 540 spaces. The current proposed parking is below the required amount for 336 spaces, to directly answer your question, Ted.
So will your calculations include the square footage for the office building too?
It's not my calculation, it's what's provided.
Oh, no, but your math that you went through.
Yes, so the math that I went through was provided here in the data sheet on the application process. The required parking per the data sheet on the packet was 540 spaces. The proposed parking currently, as it's shown, is under the required amount, showing 336 spaces. That's the site data. So, yes, 328. I see on the site data for also 336. So,
Thank you. We need to correct that. I just spoke with our engineer and architects, and it was a typo, and we need to correct it, but we have to meet the required parking, and I don't think that I'll look and specifically see per ordinance what it was, but I apologize for the typo.
I'm sorry, go ahead. The question was asked, Blair, what point do we actually validate their traffic assumptions? So the idea of their flow and so forth that they talked about in their presentation, when will that be kind of validated through a third-party review?
That's been accomplished through the TIA. There's a TIA that's been done, a traffic impact analysis for both the scenario showing the Bidwell connection and a scenario showing not including the Bidwell connection. So that information's available.
So I'm confused here. So we have a gate to prohibit access from the atrium area going onto Bidwell. We then have a small private drive for the community and the businesses that can flow back around onto Bidwell. So essentially, then Bidwell would be your primary access point, correct?
So our preference would not be to use Bidwell as the primary access.
But Atrium's restricting your access per your quote.
Oh, no. They're restricting Bidwell to be used as a through street. They're restricting Bidwell's ability to become a through street and give the
Okay.
appearance of a street.
Because
we still have
the way you
access.
presented it was Atrium was privatizing, that's a private drive, and that they were limiting your access onto their private drive, but yet then closing Bidwell. So you left it very ambiguous in your statement.
I apologize. I think we've spent so much time talking about
No.
this internally. We are maintaining our access. When you purchase a piece of property from someone, it's not uncommon for them to give you a cross-access easement. So they are okay with the tenants that live, the residents that live in this community, and the medical office. There's an access point right here. There's an access point right here. So there's one to the south, one to the north. Both of these access points give us access to this driveway and give us the ability to access out. Again, that's part of the cross-access easement agreement for this development, which would mean that the residents here do not have to go to Bidwell to leave.
So what that means is these 2 points are your main access in and out, or whichever way you choose to get into.
That's correct.
What does that do to Providence, and then
The traffic study said it did not make any changes. Most people are going to choose to go that way already. And so the number of trips that were going to go out this way did not change the traffic study.
I just want to point out that that's going to be a right-in, right-out onto Providence Road, so there won't be left-turning traffic.
So they go out on, to go north on Providence Road, they're gonna have to go out on Great Byram, make a right, and then make a quick.
Yeah, well, that's when Providence Road is widened. I'm not sure about before that's widened, but ultimately, yeah, it would be right in, right out because Providence would be limited
I mean,
access.
turning out of that area, though, is already, before the widening, very difficult as of now. So, I mean, I would restrict it if this project does come to fruition. I would restrict it before the widening to right in and right out there only, Blair, because that is very thank you. Precarious area. So, I mean, that would be definitely a condition that I would require on that Providence Road access point, right in, right out only, ahead of the schedule of the Providence Road widening.
Does the plan now show it as right in, right out? Because I want to double check with you on.
Not per their analysis that provided so far.
The issue is there's no light there.
No.
And it's extremely busy. So it does present a unique challenge because you don't have access to the sunset light and you don't have quick access to the Great Byram light. It's a drive to go up past the hospital on the backside of it. So it's,
We actually do have access to the Gray Byram light because when you
yeah, on the
We use it.
backside.
So,
yeah.
so you're gonna
Understood, but that's quite a hike.
so you're gonna be allowed access on that private drive to Great Byram, correct?
for the residents
For the
and
residents
the
and the businesses.
office through a cross-access easement. It's no different than a commercial development where one tenant builds part of the parking lot and the other tenant builds the other part, and you cross-access back and forth.
Okay. And then now my worry is, so now your access point, going back to Great Byram, I have some traffic impact questions, Blair, that maybe we can go into if that might on Great Byram, and how does that affect the emergency EMS vehicles traversing that area in that private drive?
That's going to be in the TIA, and I don't have access to it right now. Well, I could bring up the TIA, although I didn't. If you'd like.
But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if it's at all possible, but if we're not ready to go down that, then I totally respect that as well.
Would you prefer that we answer TIA-related questions after the meeting, or we can look at the TIA now if you want?
I don't see Brady in attendance.
I know, yeah.
Were we not able to sync our schedules? Okay.
I'm not sure if he's.
I can answer to the degree that that intersection was studied both ways. It was studied with or without the access to Bidwell, carrying all the way through to Gray Byram, and it was studied in front of our access. And it was determined that based on the volume of trips that were anticipated, NCDOT nor Kimley Horn made a recommendation for any additional improvements to be made as a result of this development.
Yeah, and I can confirm that. The words that stand out was that it was this no significant impact.
No significant impact, but I mean, there will be an impact at Great Byram. There will
Limited
be.
stacking and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about most. Stacking right there at Great Byram's only about 100, maybe 150 feet at most, and then now you have additional vehicles at a residential capacity, because that is their primary proposal here, is a residential capacity. It is 40% less, 60% less of the commercial square footage that we would be having by right through a by right process, because they're only proposing 40,000 square feet of the 100,000 that would be.
Yeah, with that concern in mind, I would relay the question of what is when it's age restricted, does that mean that there is a deed restriction on the property, or how is that enforced, so to speak?
The same way any zoning condition is enforced, it's a condition of the zoning, and so if you deed restricted, then it couldn't change with zoning. So if someone wanted to change the zoning and go strictly to a commercial, so we're leaving it as a specific condition of the zoning, which is legally binding, and it's carried through. Oh, but back to the question about Gray Byram, it was the stacking that would result from the traffic. That's what Brady analyzed, is how many trips would be impacted on that intersection and what necessary improvements were going to need to be made. And we always look at it's the one opportunity that they have to be able to ask us to make improvements.
How many trips went on to Great Byram?
I don't have the traffic in front of me either. I don't know.
How many trips went to Bidwell?
There was a minimal number of trips that went to Bidwell, which is why we felt confident in the elimination of the connection to Bidwell.
What's the minimum? What percentage?
Gosh, I want to say it was less than 10% of the trips, if that, were going to Bidwell. It was a very small amount.
Okay.
But they did study it both ways.
So are we at this point,
Are we allowed to have the main access to a property from an easement street? Like, that'll be the main access to the property.
From an easement street, which one?
Which is the easement street between the atrium and private drive,
Cross-access
I mean.
easement.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure which access point you're
Talk
referring
about
to.
the road that goes by the helicopter pad.
Yeah.
Okay, so the private roads of Atrium.
Yeah.
And so the question is it?
Is it allowed to be the main entrance or the main access point to this property?
That would have to be through the easement with Atrium, which has already been established for those two connections along that main road.
By ordinance,
Yeah.
yes, you're able to use cross-access easements and other private drives to access. In some ways, it's set up because NCDOT limits, the number of curb cuts that you can have along a corridor, and so it creates that situation. It's very common.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, consider it like, for instance, across the street, you might have access from one commercial outlet to another before you can actually get onto Providence Road. So it's a similar kind of circumstance. And that would also be true when the NC properties are developed immediately to the south. They would have access through that stub.
If you'd like, please step up to the microphone if you have a comment. Thank you.
Just give me another example.
Chris Brookshire, Waxhaw Associates. The reason that the main entry was not off of Providence Road was because of the improvements right there. So NCDOT did not allow us to have a curb cut because of the two bulbs that were placed right there. So that forced our entrance off of the entrance road to Atrium, where we were then granted an access easement. So that is the reason why there's no entrance off of Providence Road. And that's per our discussions with Kenley Horn via the traffic study.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments?
Good. Thank you. I have a question about the age restriction. Bridget, if it's a zoning condition, doesn't that mean that it's up to the town to monitor whether or not the apartments are indeed deed restricted? And I don't think there's anything that says that you can't. I mean, that the apartments are in fact being occupied by people 55 or older. And I don't think there's anything that says you can't deed restrict those, at least 80% of them.
I think the goal for us was to use the conditional zoning and then the management to lock in to having an age restricted product. And I think the idea was the deed restriction wasn't necessarily needed if we did the conditional zoning and locked it in. And then the management companies oversee individually on site, like that grandchildren can't live with you, that visitors only can use the pool between the hours of 1 and 3. But I wasn't sure the deed restriction was necessary given we've got the zoning restriction.
So if you cannot rent those to 55 and older, can anybody rent them?
No.
Okay.
How many stories are we looking into?
4.
4.
But isn't it capped within our ordinances to a certain amount of feet, which would put it at maximum elevation of 3 stories, Blair?
The height would be right about the same, I think, as the hospital. I don't know that it exceeds the height of the hospital.
That's correct.
So that's what's allowed. It just depends. I forget the term, but you could have a 3-story on the upper hillside, and then it can go to 4 stories on the lower.
Okay, so technically they could be working with the elevation, and it would be but it will conform to our height restrictions within our ordinances.
Yeah. And I think you can see that on the elevation that's provided, but I'm not sure that it shows
It was
up so
unclear.
well.
It was unclear. And
Never
yeah,
use
you
the
can't tell from that one.
elevation.
There's another elevation that was done that shows it's the same level as the hospital, but it's not, it doesn't show up on these illustrations.
I'd like to touch on essentially the call out within the green areas that are designated the amenity spaces, and the amenity spaces is just open for right now. Does anybody would like that is here the applicant like to touch on what the amenity spaces would be including? You guys are advertising this as active adult, but I mean, I gotta say I don't see walking trails really in here. I don't see pathway connectivity to that part that meets our PED plan really, or essentially our our future planning goals in connecting into and expanding essentially our walking trail availability to our citizens.
You have to get active into a car.
Yeah, this is purely a car-driven proposal.
So in response to your question, so the active adult is a lifestyle. So it is a facility where folks, you know, like Bridget said, they're selling their single family home. They're getting away from mowing the grass. They're getting away from, but they want the same lifestyle. They want the same amenities that they would have at an HOA clubhouse. They want the same finishes. And I guess in response to your question is, it would be standard amenities that you would see in a market rate scenario. You would have a pool. You would have an active courtyard, and we haven't designated which one is active or passive, but we would have an active courtyard, would have a pool, barbecue and grilling. We would have a passive courtyard that would have, you know, a small garden area. You know, well, yes, the trail is down below, but there's ways within the facility itself to provide the active lifestyle. We do yoga, we do water aerobics in the pool and things like that. So in regards to the specific facility or the project, there are ways that we do that through programming and things like that. Now, outside of this, that's the reason why we proposed the connection to Bidwell. Again, it's a stormwater facility road. We would connect to Bidwell. Folks could come out of the parking lot, walk down the sidewalk, and cruise into the neighborhood right there down Bidwell. We also have proposed the trail around the pond as well. So there's plenty of places to be active outside of the community as well as inside the community.
So I'm just highlighting on the screen, in the event that this wasn't a vehicular connection, you can see where the sidewalk goes here. It follows along the maintenance drive. The sidewalk then picks up and can loop around the stormwater pond. This is intended to be a multi-use path. So you can see where it sort of tapers down from the road width at Bidwell, tapers down to more of a trail connection.
Is there a setback requirement from that existing stormwater facility? Maybe it's a question for Blair. Blair?
Go ahead.
Is there a requirement for any setback from the existing edge of the existing stormwater facility to
From the stormwater facility, I'm not familiar with that, but I think that what's going to dictate that is the grade separation between the finished floor of the building and what that stormwater detention pond is set at, because there's a significant drop from the finished floor of the building just down to the Bidwell connection road. So that's going to necessitate that it's a good distance back. I mean, are you concerned about the setback of the building itself or other items that aren't shown?
The unshown accessory dwellings or
Okay.
accessory pieces to the active adult.
Right,
being
because
proposed.
we are seeing the buffers called out from all other sides except from the site side, and that's what.
And I noticed a discrepancy too. So the proposed concept site plans shows a road here near the gate access, but the one previous slide had that blocked off here on your proposed architectural schemes. There's no connection there. There's a connection there.
So this is the one that we submitted.
And then go to the next one.
Okay, so this is the one that we submitted, and this is what we would prefer to do.
Okay.
Make it pedestrian.
So-
in the portion where it's the stormwater.
Yes.
So it's just are you connecting to Bidwell, or are you?
We would prefer to connect, but with a pedestrian connection to Bidwell. We would much prefer this more narrow pedestrian connection that feeds into this idea of an amenity area that doesn't create, candidly, I would hate for this to be a road that someone thinks that they can drive by, and then when they get here, they hit a gate because it's private property.
So is Bidwell then going to be gated at the neighboring residential, the established residential area, is that going to be gated?
We would bollard this because the road, this wouldn't be a road anymore. It would potentially be where Bidwell ends. It turns into a sidewalk or trail. And so it doesn't need to be vehicular gated. It could be bollard so that it, like what you do, a typical trailhead, so that a car can't pass by.
Okay.
So it's definitely the idea of this second option, so the alternative. So the last word up on the title is the alternative, is the one that we would prefer, the preferred, is for this to be a pedestrian connection all the way through. The only reason it's wider here is because it's providing that maintenance, and so we can gate at that point or bollard, so a maintenance truck can't go all the way through.
Okay, that makes sense. So your alternative versus the proposed that are formally on your application left it very ambiguous into your interpretation on what is truly the connectivity here, and is it then meeting the ordinances?
Well, the plan that was submitted, which was in my presentation, that I didn't go through the details of it, obviously, but the Bidwell connection was an actual road that continued from Bidwell all the way to the network atrium, and so the alternative that I don't know if it's a formal request or not, but what they would rather have is just a path rather than an actual street. The town would want to see an actual road connection there in order to meet the intent of the future land use plan and the land development code.
Our ordinances, park ordinances, active recreational space for multi-use family. Well, 152nd an acre is not on this application.
135th.
Or 135th.
Yeah.
Sorry, 135th an acre is not proposed on this application. Is not here in the details of the site plan. Are they looking to pay fee in lieu? Are they because they're not providing parkland based off of this current proposed? Would you like to go to the microphone? Thank you.
It's a team effort. They would like me to do it all, but they're smarter.
Hey, Brandon Plunkett with McAdams. So we are proposing
I'll be your
on the southern bound, well, I guess that's Plan South. Plan Southern boundary, a large tree save area. The property line is actually all the way to the south there. So there's a bunch of tree save. And then there's a little bit running up the eastern property. Yep, as well.
Our ordinances specifically require, since you're requesting residential access, a residential conditional, 135th an acre to be dedicated to the town for public active recreational area, which would be parkland. That would be publicly accessible to all residents within incorporated and unincorporated Waxhaw.
Or a fee in lieu.
Or a fee in lieu. And that was left off the application at this point. And so, as this is a conditional request, we're asking for clarity on what you're pursuing.
What's your preferred path is?
Our goal is to maintain the buffer down below, and if that, I think as we continue the site design, obviously going from schematic to detailed construction drawings, we can see kind of where we end up, and obviously, we want to provide an amenity to the town. I don't know if that means cutting in some trails down in the tree save area and things like that. One of the things we're navigating against is in the community meeting. Those folks, again, didn't want, active events or walking and things like that in that area. So I think it's one of these things where we need to collaborate during the design process, figure out what the best solution is, and if we need to pay fee in lieu, we need to pay fee in lieu. But I mean, our goal would be to use, the large amount of tree save that's already there. So.
Actually, I do need to clarify and kind of come to the rescue. When they submitted, that was the requirement in the land development code for fee in lieu for multifamily is a recent text change, and they submitted actually before that text change was made. So that particular requirement is not their responsibility. We've since made the text change, but they submitted
When did
prior
they
to
submit the application?
Oh, gosh, what was the date?
Because, I mean, this is just coming to us, and that ordinance just changed quite a while ago to
Yes.
update that.
3 to 4
It's-
months ago, I think.
That's my
Yeah,
and our-
it's-
prior to that.
Yeah, prior
We've-
before.
Yeah, I don't know the date, but it was prior to the text change.
Well, we had an existing ordinances requiring 1/35 an acre prior to that change, but we did update and solidify essentially the scale of that within,
But not
Two-
for multifamily.
not for
It didn't apply
multifamily.
to multifamily.
Okay.
And that was an obvious when we saw the
But
the
this is
issue, we wanted
conditional.
to correct it. Yeah.
Correct? This is conditional?
Yes, so you can put that condition on it, certainly. Yeah, and I'm here to make a list of what those conditions are, and they are too, and so that they can work out, okay, is that something that they want to do, because it has to be a mutual agreement, of course, but this is your opportunity to go ahead and list out what are those conditions you want to add or you feel are necessary in order to meet the intent of the Waxhaw 2040 comprehensive plan, or whatever concerns you might have.
Except I would like to add that there is a statute that you've probably all heard of it. It's called the Permit Choice Rule, which allows the applicant to follow the rules that were in place when they submitted their application. So if they, in fact, did submit their application before this text amendment, then they're not required to comply with the text amendment under the Permit Choice Rule.
Okay, so 1/35 of an acre was in place prior to the text amendment solidifying the verbiage for multifamily. So because of our clarity in cleaning up that ordinance, they had submitted an application prior to that, and the 1/35 an acre that was already in place predating their application submittal would not qualify
Because it's multifamily, yes.
because it's multifamily.
Yeah,
Okay.
but again, this is your opportunity to put conditions on this plan. So, and some of I mean, there's been specific questions about recreational facilities and such. For a rezoning plan, it's often the case that you wouldn't see all those details, but they would still be listed as part of the conditions. They would still be written conditions.
Okay, all right. That was also going to be my next question. Is they're talking about amenities to turn this into an active adult area that is for age restricted 55, but outside of a small trail around the retention pond, I'm not seeing very much that shows that this is active adult.
So I think it's important to clarify again, the term active adult isn't necessarily outdoor recreation only. It's an overall lifestyle. Again, there's a gym, art classes, yoga classes, meditation, everything internal, a swimming pool where, I mean, they play volleyball every day, which amazed me. It's not that we're dismissing the need for amenities. One of the things that we talked about during the community meeting with the number of residents that have lived along this property line are used to a very quiet backdoor neighbor, which happens when you get used to nothing behind you. So what we really tried to do here was keep this area all as the tree save and the stormwater and minimize. And also recognize that if we do these amenity areas, they are absolutely going to be tucked up in the building. We can show you, I mean, one of the reasons we sometimes don't put them on conditional plans is then people lock in and think the pool is going to go exactly in that location, and you said the pickleball was going to go exactly in that location. You get a little more into the engineering details. We know that the active outdoor amenities are going to be in these two pockets. We know that we would like to provide a sidewalk, and that's what's shown, but we know we can do the sidewalks and the loop trail. So I think that this very much will have components of outdoor recreation and support an active adult lifestyle that could also happen within the building.
One of the challenges too that we work back there.
Please step up to the microphone.
Sorry. One of the challenges too that we're working back there is, like Blair said, there is a decent topo that kind of runs down. So I think as part of our development process, you would typically do a cut fill analysis to figure out kind of where your final elevation ends up and how far we can extend back, right? So again, I think there's some value in keeping a lot of the buffer that currently exists along that the northern side of the pedestrian connection. It's really about putting the pen to the paper and figuring out, what are the limits of the pool and what are the limits of the gardening and how much square footage gets allocated to each one of those items, so that everything again is it connects through the back, it flows, the the pool makes sense with what's going on the inside, right? So there's got to be connectivity to the inside into an open space, and you're not ending into a hallway and things like that. So there's some more design that has to take place on the inside that also dovetails into what's going on in the courtyards, right? That has to flow in the right sequences and things like that, right? So you would put your active amenities where the interior active amenities where typically your exterior activities would be, and then you would put your quieter, more art-related, yoga-related stuff on the passive side, and those would kind of connect in and out. So there's some logic to that. It's just until we understand kind of what that hillside is doing, we don't know the extents of how far we can really come out.
Those would be then reviewed under final plat. Is that correct, Blair?
Oh, and the construction documents, and then again in final plat, yes.
Construction documents in final plat. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I just want to mention that if you want to add conditions to this plan, you may want to, if there are specific, particular recreational related or open space related conditions or any kinds of conditions, this is your opportunity to make that list.
So, for example, a condition could be that the amenities include a pool, active courtyard, passive courtyard, and trail, all the things that Bridget has talked about. But I think they are correct. Until they have a grading plan, they're not going to know exactly where those can be located on the site, but your condition could be they include those.
Okay. Yeah, that's I was going to be my question is how do we go about conditioning those things when we don't have a true conceptual plan, because there is some grading issues taking place that are kind of putting a question mark on the project.
I don't know that I would consider that an impediment. I would just say, for instance, if you're very concerned about pedestrian connectivity through the plan, regardless of how the final grading is going to turn out, you could say there needs to be an established pedestrian network through the project that allows pedestrian connection to the commercial, to the area in the back with the open space. You can just verbalize it. You can put it in writing. Without seeing without seeing more detail than what we're seeing now.
Okay.
Right, so you brought up the pedestrian connectivity to the retail or commercial that would be needed for a daily life. So the only walkway or only pedestrian connectivity, if I were a resident and if I have to walk to Aldi or Lowe's or Walmart, is coming through the rear side or walking through the parking garage and then getting onto the Providence, correct?
There isn't a parking garage as part of our development.
No, I mean parking, the surface parking.
Atrium.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you describe a little bit more? I mean, I know where
The
the
point I'm trying to make is if I were a resident and if I needed to walk to either Lowe's or Walmart, which is right there, my only way to get there is from that back pedestrian pathway which connects eventually to the Sunset Hill Road?
No, there's a sidewalk along our driveway. I'm sorry, I don't think you can see my cursor.
Okay.
There's a driveway, a sidewalk along this driveway. There's a sidewalk along our site's frontage that could take you to the signal. There are sidewalks through the parking lot.
Okay.
So I think I get, and to expand on Deepa's point for pedestrian connectivity. So the site across the street, Adelena, has future commercial opportunities, but the only pedestrian crossway on Providence is Sunset Hill, and there is no call out, and I believe at this time there is no pedestrian connectivity available by NCDOT at Great Byram, and so are there any pedestrian improvements that would be going in place? Because I don't even think Sunset Hill, I think they even have a limited crosswalk. There is no crosswalk. Thank you. There is no crosswalk at this time. So are you going to be fulfilling and updating that PED plan?
Are we going to be updating the PED plan?
No. Will they be because they're active adult recreational area to cross over to those commercial opportunities to buy groceries or go shopping. There is no PED connectivity to go over NC-16, and that's problem. That we're not.
So would you like to add that pedestrian crossing as one of the conditions for this rezoning to be worked out through the process of,
I think we need to understand NCDOT's road widening and what they have already contemplated at the intersection of Sunset Hills in terms of the pedestrian crossing and any pedestrian refuges that are included, as well as how that's going to change at Gray Byram.
Okay, so another question mark that can't be answered at this time.
I have to say we've gone through pretty extensive review, and this is the first time we've heard about making that type of off-site sidewalk connection. I think the infrastructure is there and in place to date, so we'd have to understand what could be done to, like, what's the missing piece that we can improve upon. I think that's a little bit open-ended for us as well.
Yeah, probably the intersection at Sunset Hill is going to be the most likely close by intersection where those facilities are going to be possible in subsequent planning stages. Like, for instance, when this NC property gets developed, that may be part of that. I don't know, but it would seem most logical that it happened there. But that's not, making an off-site type of promise for this development might be a far ask. I mean, to cross 16.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, definitely.
So, and then that means that then for connectivity within our PED plan, the furthest that this active adult recreational area can go down is they'd have to go down, if they, for walking connectivity, it would go all the way down then to Cuthbertson. Is there a crosswalk at Cuthbertson? Yes. So Cuthbertson, yeah, and they can cut through Cureton, and so that's now either more vehicular traffic if they're connecting on to Bidwell, for those folks to go to Cureton and shop, and then or walk through the Cureton area. And how's our pedestrian right away in Cureton?
Well, there is the if you're talking about mostly crossing 16, there is the existing crosswalk at Cureton.
Okay.
Yeah, Cuthbertson. So it's not ideal, definitely. Crossing 16 is a challenge in this town, we know.
I think I jokingly would say I regret anyone ever putting the label active adult on the building. It's a term that gets used to describe different users, but it's not intended to reflect the off-site recreation or walkability. If anything, I would define it, if we were doing it, as the age-restricted senior housing. And so I'm not dismissing the value of walkability or anything to that effect, but I just don't want it to get lost that our goal was to be able to create an opportunity for people to age in place, to be able to have uses. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say.
But you're shoehorning in a residential community in an economic center, which this is conditional because it's different than the intended use of that corridor when it was originally planned. So
Yes.
that's why it gets brought up. So, I mean, your point's well taken. I get it. If you put this somewhere else, people are going to want to bring their golf carts to their active community. That's not going to happen in this case. I can almost guarantee it, right?
No, I mean, that's not what we've seen at Ray
Right.
Farms.
But the pedestrian connectivity is important because of its proximity to all the other stuff in this corridor.
We don't.
And I would just, while I have the floor, and I don't mean to be,
No, go ahead.
I'm going to give you a chance to
Go
talk. But while I'm thinking about it, it is different. And I did want to talk about the medical office buildings. How tall are those? How many stories?
2 stories.
2 stories. So you're 20,000 square feet in each building.
Correct.
I'm going back to the original by right. It would be just 100,000 square feet in some sort of office building or whatever. That's what was in the presentation. To me, if you're fitting 40,000 those 2 little buildings, and you've got 3 floors of an active community, I would Well,
They're-
4 in some places,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 4 in some
I would
places.
think that you'd be able to get more than just 100,000 square feet of commercial space. And then you do need the parking to go with it. So
Yeah,
parking
that was it.
is an issue. I'm with you. But that's more consistent and with the whole original intent of that corridor.
Long-term future planning.
Yeah.
Of employment center zoning.
I'm seeing issues with the distance to get to Great Byram and all that. So there's a lot to overcome, a lot of conditions that we put on this to make it viable, so it's not an island. And I'm just thinking that from the original intent, this is something that they got right for planning into 2040, all that stuff. The regular economic center makes more sense to me than putting an island of residential right there. That's for whatever that's worth. I apologize. You were about to say something else.
I was just going to address your comment about the golf carts. So operationally, we don't allow golf carts.
Yeah.
So again, this is a very active.
My point would have been, if you put this somewhere else, they would have golf carts there, I would think. And then you really do have an active adult community where people, they're kind of living the way they want to live in a situation like that.
I think this is a more centralized facility. It's very
with you.
it's very more intimate. So looking at like a Sun City where everything is super spread out, and they have golf carts, and then that may be part of their code down there, or whatever it is. But we don't feel that in these more intimate settings
Yes,
that
they
the
wouldn't
golf
need
carts are required, right? So again, I'm not saying that folks tend to hang around the community more, but it's very involved. It's a lifestyle. Back to the amenities we bring in, yoga folks, we bring in hair and nail folks, we bring in financial advisors, and we really try to, again, it's an activated. It's folks not sitting at home and just watching the news all day. We try to, and Sarah can speak to this if you want some more intimate information about the program, but it's almost like being on a cruise ship, right? There's stuff going on in the morning from 8 to 10. There's there's pool volleyball, there's yoga, there's wine hour and things like that. So the same things that you would do at home or go somewhere, you're doing in a more intimate setting.
Thank you.
I just want to mention too that when you hear active adult, it also implies that it's independent living. It is senior residents that don't require. Yeah. Okay.
Understood.
We won't be doing any healthcare services. There's no healthcare services here.
Okay, yeah, because that was spurring on a whole nother question of you're now describing something to where are you going to be providing healthcare services?
We're all here.
Because you're describing something that is now, you're trying to inform us that it's self-sustaining and you don't need those connectivities that we're looking for, that our ordinances provide or actually are supposed to be fulfilled in this conditional process, and so you're now describing something that is more of a sunsetting community, and which then why are we going through this process?
So,
I can speak to that if you
let me ask one thing. Blair, in terms of the ordinance requirements, I think we're meeting all of the ordinance requirements in terms of connectivity with the sidewalks that we provide along our frontage, everything that we have connecting to the hospital. I'm going to just call it Plan North for sake of ease. Creating the pedestrian connectivity, I think, would also meet the ordinance requirements if it happened in lieu of the vehicular connection. So I think in terms of ordinance requirements, I believe we're meeting.
We wouldn't make that determination until we are reviewing the construction documents. There are some places on the plan where it looks like there is a sidewalk connection, but maybe not as, we would still want to make some tweaks to it, particularly when along Providence Road, because there was requests for there to be greater pedestrian connections, and there are some that are shown crossing the parking lot, but we'd want to make sure that those were are satisfactory. But in terms of pedestrian connectivity itself, yes, I think you do show at least the early efforts to have those connections, but those would be finalized in the construction document phase.
Introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi everyone, Sarah Riley Siegler. I am with Greystar Real Estate Partners. We would be the management company of this community. So I just want to describe a little bit for you the active adult 55 and older lifestyle that we have on our platform. So my platform is dedicated specifically just to the active adult. With Greystar, you might notice we have conventional, student living, BTR, and active adult. So within active adult, essentially what it is conventional apartment housing with a lifestyle programming. That's going to differ depending on if it's a high-end, mid-market, any of those different kind of nuances within your community, and that's going to also differentiate your lifestyle programming. The 4 components that differentiate active adult 55 plus housing from a typical independent living like you would see at a Sunset community are going to be transportation, meals provided, health care, and housekeeping services. Those we would not be providing at our community because it is strictly just a conventional multifamily with an age restriction. In that lifestyle programming that we have in there, though, those are going to be leaning towards the customer value proposition that we'll have with our prospects. It's going to be living with like-minded individuals. So, you don't have someone with a child that lives above you that's bouncing a basketball on your head at, 6 in the morning or 10 p.m. at night when you're wanting to go to bed. But you're able to go downstairs and meet with people of your same age that want to potentially do things with you, whether that be one of the fitness classes, whether that be a lunch and learn where we're bringing in different partners from the community. We have a community outreach program called Just Around the Corner where we bring in other local businesses and they will come and showcase their business to our community, whether, as we were saying, financial advisors, we have different, podiatrists that will come in and showcase their business. We'll also have, weekly happy hours. All of those different events are going to be happening on a day-to-day basis so that you're still able to engage with your residents. They're able to have that lifestyle component, but we're not by any means having any skilled nursing in there, having any foods provided to them, meals, anything like you would typically find at a assisted living or a memory care facility, because the main differentiator that we like to say is that active adult 55 plus are wants-based, whereas independent living, assisted living, and memory care are needs-based services. Those are when you need to live there. Your body can't typically function anymore and you're having to have those services, where at our communities you're not necessarily at that point yet, but you necessarily don't want to have to deal with lawn care like they were saying earlier. It's a maintenance-free way of living, but you're able to do so in a communal setting with other like-minded individuals. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself.
Roger Manley, BB&M Architecture. We're heavy into the senior living industry. I kind of want to give you guys a little bit of background about what that facility is going to do for your town. It's not going to bring outside people. It's for your neighbors, because, and Sarah, you can back me up on this, it's always within a 5-mile radius that these people, come to these facilities. It's, as Sarah said, it's when they can't take care of their house anymore, they don't want to. So it's providing a place for your neighbors to actually stay in Waxhaw and, stay with their community. As far as, that goes, the average age also is like 72. So what we see in their the typical resident exercise program, it's usually walking routes within the property. It's not a super long distance, and it's laps. It's also for what they want to do is kind of stay with their group. So I get, believe me, big proponent of pedestrian connectivity. I'm not sure that probably just like the people of Curitan, they're going to be walking across the intersection to get their groceries.
The only thing I'll add to Roger's statement is I think the active adult piece is a good fit due to the location of the hospital. Right, there's services there as well as the medical office piece. Right, those three tend to dovetail together. Right, so if there's services needed, they can walk across the street, or they can go to the hospital, whatever they need.
Wait,
So
how are they going to walk across the street?
We have
The driveway.
we have an access agreement.
So they're gonna walk across the street to the ER center?
No, it's
Okay.
internal.
Not everything is an emergency, right? So if they had
I believe-
so if they had an appointment at the medical office building, they could walk across the parking lot if they chose to.
The standard medical offices are up the street. I believe that's just emergencies only, and not really seeing like.
There's capacity for Atrium to extend and add services in that hospital.
I believe its current primary function is more emergency basis.
They moved all those standard practices to
They moved all the standard day-to-day appointments to Ray Farm.
Understood. We have connections that obviously with our purchase sale agreement that allow us to have conversations, and there's still square footage to build out those facilities within the hospital if it's needed, as well as the medical office space.
Any other questions? Like to go ahead then maybe look at a motion?
Maybe just
If-
one question.
one
Sorry,
question, sure.
One question, I'm sorry. It's lingering in my mind, I would rather ask it.
No, please, Steve.
So in the traffic analysis, the sound levels from Providence have been measured or have been addressed when the actual apartment building is set back from Providence. That has been already taken care of.
I'd have to review the TIA for that specific thing, but I'm not familiar.
Right, because the way the whole site is planned, I see that the actual apartments or the multifamily portion is pretty set back. So I'm assuming that the sound levels that happen from Providence, which is very heavy nowadays, so that has been.
I can answer quickly that the traffic studies don't study sound levels on Providence Road, but it's definitely intentional to move the residential back and let the active use, the more public-facing use, be along the frontage of Providence, which carries that concept of the employment center.
And part of that, the location of the building is, over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 months as we've collaborated with Blair, the initial plan was to put the medical office building up front and put the active adult. That was part of our collaboration with Blair. So that's the reason that the active adult piece is in the rear. Again, kind of a softer setting with the trees and things like that. The medical office piece is more forward-facing toward Providence Road.
Thank you.
In conferring with Cindy, the TIA does not cover the sound levels.
Okay, thank you.
And the TIA wouldn't cover the increased traffic on the private drive, correct?
I don't think so. On the private drive, it's not the concern. It's only the concern on public streets.
Yeah.
It did actually take into consideration when they first did the traffic study. They analyzed it as if it were a public street and that traffic were going to go all the way through it. When they did the amendment, and under that scenario, they came up with a mitigation that would be required. We asked them to do an amendment once we got further into design and realized it's not a public street, not monitored as a public street, and therefore we felt it would be better to not treat it like a public street and instead do the pedestrian connection. Kimley Horn redid the study and took out any traffic that might come from Curitan or to the south coming from Bidwell, but still left in the traffic coming from the proposed rezoning.
Did your proposed request amendment and now have an analysis for closing the Bidwell connection and what your property impact would be if there was no Bidwell connection?
Yes, that was the second one. So let me go back to the first traffic study assumed that Bidwell is a public street, that we constructed a public street through our site, and that it stopped here and transitioned to a private driveway, but was still open to full access for anybody who wanted to go back and forth. So that was the first traffic study. Wide open, the world is your oyster. We asked, after realizing that we were going to have to gate it, because as a private property owner, no one would want to have that type of traffic uncontrolled through the site. We redid the traffic study, or had Kimley Horn redo the traffic study to say that there was no road connection through here. Nobody could traverse from Bidwell into our site. We cannot go from our site into Bidwell. And the only way we can leave our site is the way we go through Great Byram that way or out to Providence that way. So it was studied under both scenarios.
Did you study a scenario where it wasn't a through access, but you put traffic back from your property to Bidwell, where Bidwell is your only connection, and then your frontage on that private drive just towards NC 16, but not going back and around the private back half of the drive of the hospital?
We never did a scenario that all of the residential would access to Bidwell.
So
But in the other plan, it does show the driveway from the parking lot to Bidwell, so that could in effect happen.
Okay, so it could happen though, but it wasn't studied?
It was not seen as, I mean, I can't speak for how they did the TIA in that respect, but they didn't consider that that would be the main driveway or access point for all the residents going through that one driveway onto Bidwell, but it was considered as part of the overall flow.
Okay.
I'm not sure I follow on that other scenario. So
So
first
the
one
other
was
scenario, so
all the way through.
your gate exists as per this proposed in this depicted for the conceptual site plan, where you still have a road stub from the parking lot going onto that road going past, and now take it from your conceptual plan from just to meet the ordinance connectivity portion, and you can't you have the gate prohibiting access on the private drive where you have it, but then now your residents are going back onto Bidwell trying to access the grocery stores or restaurants through Bidwell onto Kensington.
So that's the way it's drawn today. And I think that's why our alternative would be to not have that, to not have any connections to Bidwell. No vehicular, but only pedestrian.
But that portion wasn't studied to where all that traffic is either forced onto the frontage of right in, right out on 16, or having to go through Bidwell through the established residential.
No, in both scenarios, the driveways that enter onto, I wish there was a name for that road, but the access point that's to the north and north is to the left, those driveways were there, and that western driveway was there as well. So I don't know, if I understand you right, are you asking, was there a scenario where only the western driveway was the only access to the development?
Yes, you have right in, right out on 16, and then then you have a prohibited access as depicted, which then funnels all that traffic back through onto Bidwell.
No, that wasn't done. That's
I don't think it was done because it was sort of the in-between of the two scenarios. It was the one was the full access and one was no access.
But
The Bidwell, the Bidwell thing, I don't think it works because people are going to want a shortcut through that first street. And correct me if I'm wrong, that is a narrow road. That just won't work. No, I'm talking about Bidwell in Curitan.
Oh, yes.
Going
This
right out to Sunset. That first left right there, that's a very narrow road.
And that
not
was-
continuing through, right there. Ooh, that would.
And that was my worry, is that wasn't being studied, if that is possible. It wasn't.
I wouldn't even bother studying that because
I wouldn't allow it either.
You can't let people drive down there in that narrow road.
No, it was never built for it, and that's what I wanted
Well,
to make sure.
that scenario is in the second TIA study where the Bidwell connection's not there, because what you're talking about is you didn't want to see traffic through Curitan.
No, and
that
I
Bidwell
understand
connection is what makes that possible.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that it's like, hey, are we looking at this, and if this comes about, because this is a conditional process, I think it was for planning purposes, we want to make sure that the established residents are first, and are considered first in that scenario.
First in the sense of that their roads are not going to be used by additional traffic, or first in the sense that they have connectivity to services like the hospital and other ways to get around.
To have and take that additional, those additional trips, if it gets pushed that way, where you still have to have that second connection per our ordinances onto Bidwell.
I mean, it's the staff's recommendation that that road connection be made, yes.
Okay, can I make a suggestion at
Sure.
this point? To me, this seems like one of the big pieces that's missing is TIA and having our consultant here. So my question is, can we table this decision till next month and have a full traffic discussion? Because we're doing all these what ifs, but we don't have Kinley Harms here to explain what they did, what their thinking is, what their process was, and just an idea. Because
Yes,
to me, it just seems like in the TIA, we get an incomplete package to start with, and then this kind of thing gets getting worse because we don't have all the pieces here.
Yeah, that's an option you can request, certainly. To table it and then have a presentation by those who did the TIA study.
I mean, I guess it's what you guys feel like, but I feel like we're getting hung up on traffic,
What?
and no one has an answer to looking or looked at and what their thoughts were. And so forth.
Yeah, no, definitely traffic is a worry at this point. We have a private drive, we have a prohibited access request, we have established residents that to me, I need to be prioritized in what connectivity is going to be required onto Bidwell. And we have I think that there's some challenges to this proposed at this stage that, and we don't have our expert analysis and Kimberly Horn available to us this evening. I also have some deep questions about the site data plan and the parking requirements. Per the proposed packet that I've reviewed, there's insufficient parking available. So dealing with what we have, I'm agreeable to tabling this and making sure that we're receiving all the information during this conditional process. And so, therefore, I believe, is this a formal motion, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, if everybody agrees with me, I'd like to.
Oh, well, that would be fair to the folks presenting because otherwise it becomes a different,
Yeah.
Right.
you deny it based on the information we have.
Yeah.
Because the biggest issue we're dealing with as a community is traffic. That's our number one issue. And not to have a TIA and presentation is a huge miss. I mean, from the standpoint of the information we need.
Yeah.
Because traffic is the number one thing everybody asks about. So to me, not having it in there really was getting complete information we received.
It's a valid point.
Agree with you 100%, Ted. So, all right, it sounds like we have a formal motion to table
To continue.
To continue. New verbiage. To continue this until the upcoming October, I believe it's the 15th,
Yeah.
planning board meeting.
I think we need a minute on our side to discuss just because of the contract that we have and our ability to even do that. If you could give us a moment.
All right, let's go ahead and give them we'll just recess for 5 minutes so they can
Can I-
discuss, and then we can come back here in 5 minutes then.
I'd like to ask one more question though. In terms of the traffic study, so we know we've done the traffic study and Kimberly Horn has reported the mitigation that's required under both scenarios. And I sense that everyone's leaning toward not having a connection to Bidwell, which could be a condition of this board. And if that were the case, does it need to go back to have Brady come and give a presentation if we would not prefer to have that connection anyway?
But my point is, I'd like to have most questions they asked about when it back to Great Byron. What's it going to mean? I'm not getting his head when he did his analysis to see how close he may not have carbon mitigation, but how close are we? I mean, the question is, what did he go through in his mind as far as what tipping points does he have?
What did the data show? And essentially, I know Kim Brady does a very good job of presenting to the public what the data shows and how this site would impact the surrounding residents and the surrounding road networks.
Understood.
And so, I have no problem. If you need 5 minutes, we can
do.
break for recess for 5 minutes and then come back.
Thank you.
Awesome. We're going to break for 5 minutes. but the applicant requested a 5-minute recess to discuss it amongst themselves. So, Bridget, if you'd like to go ahead, we'll lead off with you.
Thank you. So we appreciate everyone giving us the time to confer. One of the things, we've been working on this rezoning for some time, and we've had a number of delays. One of the delays was redoing the traffic study, which caused a couple-month delay to allow us to ensure that if we took away a road connection and were able to provide a pedestrian connection only, that it wouldn't cause any additional mitigation. Regrettably, the town's traffic engineer isn't here tonight, but I almost think that was in large part due to the fact that the number of trips generated didn't come close to necessitating any of the improvements. So at this point, it's very difficult for this group to table or continue for another month, knowing that we aren't sure there will be a change in the resolution, but we do have some impacts specific to our contracts and timelines that we need to meet. We also spoke for a minute about that parking number, which is lower. And recalled, Blair, that was actually one of the things that you had asked us to do, was to minimize, as a condition of zoning, to seek that we offered less parking than what's required by ordinance, again, as a condition, due to the fact that residents typically have, I think, 1.25 cars per unit. I heard that off the top of my head. So we're meeting the requirements that we need to for the commercial, and we're meeting it for the market needs of the residents who are living in the community, but it was a staff request that we do below the required amount for that reason. So I think those are the two topics we wanted to hit that are really driving our desire, that it may not be favorable to go ahead and advance this because we're not sure that the outcome will change based on that more information provided by Grady, and I believe he gave the traffic study as part of the report, and all the information's been out there and available.
Well, we did have a motion on the floor before we took a 5-minute recess. So, I'd like to go ahead. Ted, you had a motion to continue this so we can hear from our traffic expert and hear an expert analysis from our traffic engineer.
I keep forgetting to turn my mic on. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they are asking for a denial rather than a continuance. And they do have the right to request a denial.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Or just a,
Yeah.
I would prefer a
Okay.
I understood
or just a
what you
vote, or just a vote, yeah.
Yeah. You'd like the process to just move forward without...
And not be continued.
Right.
Well, then how, as a planning committee, do we give a good recommendation at that point? We haven't heard from our expert.
Yeah, the problem you said is it's been available, not to us. We haven't seen it.
No, I'll make a motion to deny recommendation of the conditional rezoning based on the fact that it's not consistent with the land use map. And do I need to put more context to that denial? That's my motion.
Second. All right, we have it seconded and a motion, but I believe we had a motion originally with Ted.
I'll go and withdraw it.
Thank you.
Based on the
Thank
information
you,
from the...
All right, motion is on the floor from John for a recommendation of denial, and it was seconded by Trey. All those in favor of denial of the application, CZ 0005-2024. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Can I make a recommendation about our next applicant? Can I make an applicant that we postpone this till next month?
Thank you.
Since our Brady's not here, and we're back to traffic again on this next one. So I hate to waste a lot of time on this next one if we can't really make a decision without the traffic information being available. We have the traffic study, but Brady's not here to answer any questions about it.
I agree with that general sentiment. The traffic study for both applications was pretty comprehensive, even though it was presented that it was minimal. There were key arteries being impacted by both applications, and to hear directly from our expert and traffic engineer would be ideal.
Yeah, James Kelly just sent me a text that called out one particular detail from the TIA. He says, if I recall correctly, Bidwell Connection had about 21 vehicles per hour during the peak hours, so roughly one car every 3 minutes during rush hour. This is relatively insignificant traffic. I want to say, though, that what's been talked about here is not just the Bidwell connection, but just the traffic impact in general of this particular development, this number of residences and such. So what he's distinguishing there is that between one TIA version and the other wasn't a huge difference, but the question remains, well, what's the overall impact? And one thing that has been stated is that the impact was small enough that there weren't calls for mitigation, off-site mitigation. So, when you have a large impact in a development, it's going to affect traffic within with a larger radius, and so mitigation is made. And as a matter of fact, in our next item, that's going to be brought up as an example. But so I just wanted to clarify that.
Because what's important to me was for Brady being here is this is conditional. We have possibly some conditions, and if he had some stuff that we didn't quite get to the point we had to put, but he recommends that, or some suggestions he might have. Again, that's what I'd love to get the feedback from.
Well, but that's what the TIA is for, but there weren't any of those mitigations suggested.
Okay.
So.
I do believe that this next application that we've talked about this Pine Oak Road, but there is some questions, and I hope maybe staff can answer these going in. But there's connection into Pine Oak Road. There's a roundabout, and so are we prepared to address some of those? What's going to happen to Pine Oak Road with that roundabout? Is it going to be restricted and kind of going into those portions of the TIA, or are we not prepared this evening in that?
What we have from the TIA are in this next agenda item, Artisan and Prescott. There are recommended mitigations.
So there are some
Yes, yes. The impact there is great enough that there are mitigations that are made.
Yeah, I think we'll discuss this.
You'll need Brady here to talk about the mitigation, River.
I would prefer Brady to be here if there is mitigations.
This is Eric Keeney with Whitewaters. The mitigations as part of the whole Prescott Village was done with the shopping center, which is under construction. The design for the all offsite improvements is already underway with the town. James, I'm sure he's listening clearly. Yeah, James is up here somewhere. We're working with James actively, DOT, on all offsite improvements, and they're already mostly done design. We're starting construction on them within the next couple months.
Okay, so the portion that I know that was in this packet, we've kind of split the project. There's the front half that was commercial, that was advancing the commercial aspects. We adjusted the zoning to fit the future tenant in their square footage requirements, and then this second portion of the application was addressing the back half of the residential component.
Yes, sir.
Of this application. My only, and I'm going to gear it back to staff then, I guess then it goes back to, if we have some of those questions, Blair, we can go through this process and talk about this application, but I do know that then there is some impact at Pine Oak that is, and was that part of the original analysis, or is this predominantly driven by the residential component?
I don't have the traffic numbers available of how Pine Oak will be affected, but what I can show you is where those mitigations are being made.
Yeah, and on top of that, when we had done the TIA, we did the TIA as a whole for the 83,000 square feet shopping center, Lowe's Foods anchored, and then 222 homes, which is what by right we could have done, and this is only for 169. So Pine Oak was mitigated. It's under design. We're working with DOT, the town, everyone on those mitigations right now, and like I said, we're going to be starting construction on that.
And the
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And, yeah, and I want to stress that the mitigations are not just on Pine Oak at the Waxhaw Marvin side, but significant mitigation along at Providence Road on 2 intersections. So, which the presentation would show.
We had a motion to continue. Do we?
Without hearing the
Was
presentation.
it a suggestion? Or was it a motion, Ted? Suggestion?
Well, again, I just want to see that people kind of agreed.
Okay.
How important it was to have someone here to talk about traffic study versus.
I'm okay listening to the presentation.
Yeah, I think we can
make a vote on it.
I think we can move forward if it sounds like we're armed with some information, and if we get into a spot where we have some ambiguity, then we can bring that back up, Ted, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with your permission, I'll go ahead and proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Blair.
So this is Artisan at Prescott, preliminary subdivision plat. And so what we have here is SUB 015473 2024, request by Eric Andy, who we have here tonight, with Widewaters for a by right preliminary subdivision plat on approximately almost 67 acres. The proposed subdivision contains, as he said, 169 single-family attached units. The overall density is 2.5 units per acre. Why is this not forward? Oops. It was lagging, sorry. Okay, so here you can see the property location. I think everyone's fairly familiar, but the area in blue is the actual area that we're talking about tonight, although it is, it is part of an overall development that involves that Lowe's food site. That's sort of the commercial element of the neighborhood center area. What you're seeing here is neighborhood center in brown and then R4 in the tan. Sorry, the distinction isn't too clear on this particular slide. R3, of course, in the surrounding neighborhoods, and the corridor commercial in red along Providence. So that's the zoning in a nutshell. And of course you see Union County wastewater plant above it. And the project rests along 12 Mile Creek. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. But here you can see that area that was in the blue. There's the actual impact is a lot less than you might think, because most of it is in floodplain. So you can see the units there outlined. And so let me just point out, you have Prescott Glen Parkway, and you can see Pine Oak Road and Kemble Street. Those would be the connections of the development. Good. And so you can see you can see a couple of the mitigations right there in those roundabouts, and how the traffic from, right now we have all the traffic coming out through Pine Oak Road, and I'll let the developer talk more about that, but I just want to show you really quickly that you can see Pine Oak Road now intersects with the Prescott Glen Parkway at that roundabout, and then that feeds into that lower development. The upper development just connects directly to Kemble Street, which is part of Prescott. So in terms of transportation and TIA, what you'll see here are 3 stars that show where the biggest mitigations are being made. You can see, we'll start at the bottom with Pine Oak, where it joins Waxhaw Marvin Road, and that inset there to the left shows just sort of a sketch of how that intersection would be revised to handle the traffic better, much safer situation with the traffic light. You can see that to the left. And then there is also the roundabout, which is depicted in that inset where Pine Oak and Prescott Glen merge. But the reason for that is that Prescott Glen is what's going to be handling the traffic getting onto 16, and that there will be a traffic light there. Where you see Pine Oak, where the existing Pine Oak is, that would be a right in, right out only. So that's going to ease the traffic a good bit, where right now people struggle to get into and out of Pine Oak to join 16. Yeah, yeah. So just very quickly, the recreation, open space, landscaping issues. Here we have the requirement for 20% open space. I'm just going to read so I don't miss a couple of details that I wanted to include. Accessible recreation space, it can take the form of trails, parks, plazas, playgrounds, community gardens. During the construction plan review phase of the process, staff will ensure that the common space is arranged with landscaping and includes park elements as required by the LDC Section 6. So just sort of as it relates to the other project where the details couldn't be seen, those are all under review in the construction document phase. The applicant is also providing trail easements per the town's pedestrian plan along both 12 Mile Creek and the Feeder Creek per the adopted PED plan. I want to point out that this is a crucial junction of the greenway plan and pedestrian plan for the town. 12 Mile Creek represents our biggest opportunity to cross town east to west on Greenway, and we're already making a lot of efforts to get that plan into place, or rather into reality. We're right in the middle of a 12 Mile Creek feasibility study now for the Greenway along that whole segment. And again, it stretches all the way across town. Sunny Way would be coming next in our planning process, and it's more of a north-south connection, and so you can see where the junction is right here at the tip of this project, and Sunny Way would continue north there for a ways. The town also requires a land dedication or fee in lieu for recreational purposes. As you're aware, the applicant is required to donate 1/35 of an acre per unit or pay a fee in lieu of that required space. Based on the 169 units, 4.8 acres shall be dedicated to the town or fee in lieu shall be accepted based on the property's tax value at the time of the final plat. Staff recommends a combination of land for the Carolina Thread Trail, and that would be along the 12 Mile Creek, and the Feeder Creek of up to 20 feet accredited towards the donation, and then the remaining, what would be left over after those corridors are provided, would be 3.24 acres that should be paid in fee in lieu. That is staff recommendation. It's very crucial to the town to see that this opportunity for building that greenway happens in conjunction with this development. The town will have the area from the creek edge all the way to 20 feet past the top of bank to site the trail. So it's a significant corridor that we would be able to establish through this development. And just to say that the plan meets all buffer and street trees and on the law requirements. So let's see, I'll move on. Again, this is a by right. Yes, go ahead.
Mind if you jump back one slide, Blair?
Sure.
If you don't mind. So, 20-foot trail easement for 12 Mile Creek and Sunny Way. Mm-hmm. So both would be.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not as familiar with this project to give you 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure that it does include both.
Okay. Do we have a possible trailhead area that would be part of the connectivity plan within this plat?
Well, I think that they show up in the construction documents, those trailheads, but yeah, they would be at the opportune locations. This wouldn't be, I mean, that's certainly not an opportunity we would miss on this project. Of course, there would be access to those greenways,
So to expand on that access, with that trailhead portion, I understand it would be pushing more towards final plat and construction documents, but I would like to bring up for consideration, recommendation to think about with staff of where would we want the trailhead and where would we allow public accessible parking within this plat.
Public accessible parking, I think, is a bigger issue. There are some places in the construction or in the proposal where those are shown. And Eric, maybe you can elaborate on that, where that parking would be.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So, I mean, we've been working with staff for the past, on really the last two iterations of these plans here on the Greenway, and it's been an important issue for them, and we've been addressing it. So we've provided on-street parking in a couple different areas. key areas for where you would tie into that greenway. And Blair, I did want to jump back to the other part that you weren't positive on. So along, what's that? Along Sunny Way as well, that's actually a 30-foot easement that we're providing there. And then along 12 Mile Creek, so the east-west portion of the site, we're donating, getting credit for 20 feet. We're actually donating 60 feet, and we're only receiving credit for 20 of it. That was in conversation with staff, as I'm not sure what your statutes are. But
Yeah, that has to do with the top of bank, and that it's 20 feet beyond the top of bank, but then everything from top of bank to the
yeah, obviously along the creek, it's a lot of topo, so it's
so only the 20 feet from the top of bank is considered part of that
Accreditation.
accreditation.
Yes, sir.
Per our ordinances. That makes sense. So I'm 100% in agreement. You know, the Greenway is a vital portion of our long-term vision plan and trail network. I just would like to bring that up of like, okay, where do we want these outside usable access points? Because so it wouldn't be just the internal residents, because we want to advertise that as walkability, to bring in additional aspects from just maybe the neighboring residential area or regional area preferably. And so where would those trailhead parking be?
Yeah, can you provide some detail of what those
sure.
spots
Do,
are?
do you have?
Well, the actual I don't know that it's. Whoops, what happened there? Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is probably the best we're going to do here.
Yeah.
Sure.
So,
It approximate. This is a recommendation,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
we're all talking about it
yeah, of course.
openly.
So in talking with staff, we've gone back and forth a couple times, and what we decided is, listen, at this time, can't really determine because we're still in construction drawings. But so if you imagine, and I'm sure many of you have driven down Prescott Glen Parkway, and currently it dead ends here. Obviously, we're providing the roundabout. So in talking with staff, I guess staff is working with outside entities to create a bridge here. So we have, on-street parking along, in these nodes. There's also been conversations with staff of us providing, I'll call it a private trail. It's not really private though, it's just on our land, right?
An internal trail.
Sure, yeah, butting into the trail here, all right, and just kind of spidering in throughout our wetlands to get into that greenway. And then staff also recommended, and we've provided some on-street parking here as well. And staff had asked that if they could provide signage and whatnot. So it's all pieces that we're working with Blair and Russell.
Would the Kemble Street parking area that you just referred to, would that also serve as a trailhead to get over to 12 Mile Creek? Would there be a opportunity to cross over into
to go like north to
the creek?
Up into.
Oh, I see. You're talking about it would be off-site, or would it be on-site?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is all floodplain, right? So you can't develop that. But the on-street parking runs along in this node here. And then, again, with staff, we've been working on ways how you connect that into the trail that will be developed at 12 Mile Creek.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you addressing that question for me.
Of course. I know that's been a big point with staff, and we've been working with Blair and the rest of the guys, and figured it would come up today as well.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you for taking a
Yeah,
pause
I know we went a little out of order here.
All right, so this is a by right administrative process. No conditions may be placed on this plat. The process would be the preliminary plat, planning board recommendation, which is tonight, and then the board decision. After that would be construction plan review, where the staff reviews the finalized TIA, fully engineered plans, including water quality, water quantity plans, utilities, detailed landscaping elevations, and all outside agency reviews prior to approval. And then, of course, the final plat after that, which once construction plans are approved by applicant, an applicant may begin land disturbing activities. Homes are not permitted to be constructed until the final plat is approved and construction is bonded. Final plat shall be submitted for recording within 2 years of preliminary plat, otherwise they got to go back to start. So staff does recommend approval of the Artisan at Prescott preliminary plat as presented. The motion is for a favorable or unfavorable recommendation for the petition as presented.
Blair, do you mind going back to the overview of the site to the best that we have in the slide deck?
This one?
Awesome. Thank you. There's a couple of spots that I wanted to recommend a couple of evaluations. I was looking up, and I'm used to the acronym being used regularly of BMP, and on this plat we used SCMs, and so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding SCM on this. Is that storm control measures?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted, and so they're meant to help slow the flow of the storm water runoff, but it's not a retention pond. And so it will still flow back into 12 Mile Creek in that floodplain area. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the intent from the engineer's standpoint, and I'm not an engineer in the least bit, but I think their intent is just putting markings on here to show where any storm control measure may be in the actual engineering of it hasn't happened. I mean, this is a little more than what we had just seen with the Atrium folks. It's a little more designed, but not fully designed, right? So like this pond right now, we're actually, this one right now is going in, right? They're digging it currently. And then we show a couple other of those storm control measures referenced here, and then one in the back as well. And actually one more, a lot of ponds here.
So I had a little bit of a worry that I wanted to bring up as a recommendation to evaluate in the storm control area, essentially in the pie shapes near Pine Oak. This one here, this one is secondary reference. I wanted to bring up the storm control measures because we recently had not an insignificant storm come through, and Pine Oak Bridge was deemed impassable and closed because of storm water. And I wanted to bring up the evaluation of that bridge in the Pine Oak and how the storm water is mitigated, because now this site during development will become impervious in large portions of it, where it is existing right now in its raw and undeveloped form, with large portions of it being pervious surface. And with Pine Oak recently have been closed due to stormwater, I wanted to emphasize that staff evaluate to the best of their ability those control measures, because it is so key and so close to Pine Oak Road. And I wanted to ask staff, and I know that this may be a little more outside of the scope of our planning process, but is there anything that we can do? Is vegetation clogging up that area that caused the flooding and closure of Pine Oak Road? Because do we need to dredge it because of sediment? Is there some things that I just wanted to raise a flag essentially in the thoughtful process of, and I know it's more of an engineering question, but I wanted to raise that up because we are talking about stormwater control measures.
Well, the recommendations that you're making there, just throwing out a few ideas, those would be something maybe to pursue if the changes were not part of this development. As this development is done, all those the stormwater calculations and everything that you see there is going to significantly alter that stormwater flow. And so right now, yes, maybe some improvements could be made if no changes were being made, such as you see there. But with those changes, all those mitigations are going to be factored in by the engineer and the designer.
Definitely, but I felt like not only for ourselves as a planning process, but for the public as a whole, it was worthwhile bringing up, because it was a point that impacted our residents.
No, I mean, this opportunity, what we have here is an opportunity to fix those things, to rectify it through this development. Now, granted, you're going to see some more
flow,
impervious area going in, so mitigation has to be made for that. but it's also an opportunity to fix some things that are desperately needed.
Definitely. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up with that, the storm control measure closest to the residential areas, I wanted to bring up and question essentially the setback call out from that property and the buffers and screening. I going through our ordinances, reading what I read in our buffers and screenings and how that was, because that is a kind of if that area is a storm control area and traffic is flowing through that area on a regular basis, which it will, I wanted to bring up that residential call out on that site and note that I felt based off of our ordinances that there might be a little bit of a setback and or screening question. And my recommendation is to evaluate that portion near that storm control area and making sure that we do have enough of a setback away from that retention or control measure, and making sure that there's enough screening, because there will be vehicular headlights, traffic, noise, light pollution that will be affecting that dwelling unit there.
Sure. Well, this is, a subdivision plat, so it's not going to go into that level of detail, but the construction documents would.
Yes, but from the planning purposes, I just wanted to bring it forth as a point of recommendation to pay attention or have additional consideration.
So the specific concerns have to do with
setbacks and screening.
Setbacks and screening.
That was lot number 89.
Thank you. Can remember the lot number.
Is that in here?
Can you find
right
it?
at-
Can you point to it?
I
Right
can't.
there.
I
That
can't see
guy.
that. Okay, 89. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, any end unit, especially when
jump.
it's near an intersection, sure.
And
it's gonna be
and with being near where a storm control measure is going to be, I just thought it hard to tell on this from the submitted application. Worth recommending to make sure that there's we kind of go through that one with a little more of a fine-tooth comb, for lack of
Yeah,
better words.
no, absolutely.
There was one issue with between pages 1 and 7 in the packet, that the 4 units that are right there in that, there's only 3 units with 87 left out on page 7, but 87's in page 1. I didn't know if that was a change that was made on the fly.
Or a typo.
Or a typo where 87.
So in
Yeah,
It's not drawn, so that you get time. It's not drawn.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
Well,
So where he pointed to
These
that,
4.
Lot 87 doesn't exist on page 7.
If you go to LP9, drawing number LP 9.0, it shows only 3.
it shows 3 residential dwelling units,
And I
not
wasn't
4,
sure if that change was
and
made
then this one shows
because
4.
it's so tight in there.
Yeah,
It's the dwelling unit count.
it's there's 169 townhomes. That is a 4.
I want to know which one's which.
We just wanted clarity.
There's
That's an
100
inconsistency on the plans that needs to be cleared up, it sounds like.
Yes, that we wanted to point
There's
out.
169 lots, which is again below the
Yeah.
zoning limit.
That's great.
There is 4 units there. Good thing my engineer's not here, or else I'd give him a stern glare. Maybe they're watching online, but yeah, no, there are 4 units there.
Okay, and again,
It totals 169.
it goes back to we're just doing our due diligence on behalf of the public and making sure that as we're going through it, it's like, hey, there's an inconsistency here. We want to bring this to attention.
Almost seems like when I look through the whole packet, it almost seems like it's where is the very first one that has 4 is the first thought, which is
Less is more.
Yeah, in this case, that's right.
So
I'm looking at my site plan right now. I printed off right before it came. There are 4 units. I mean, there's 4 units there. The 4 units is accounted for in the 169.
okay,
So if they were omitted on one of the pages, I don't know how that happened, but there are 4 units.
mistake. We're all human.
And this might be a level of detail that you guys aren't getting into, but speed tables along Prescott Glen Parkway to does that get discussed at this level, or is that for the construction plans?
Specifically, we would, I know I was wondering if there would be some speed tables along the residential frontage of Prescott Glen Parkway.
Yeah, those generally wouldn't show up in a plat.
Okay. And then, so that was one of our other recommendations
Yeah.
of consideration in front of those residential units, if to evaluate if speed tables would be appropriate. For, I hope there's not on-street parking as a traffic calming measure at that stretch, but maybe some speed tables would, to make it more pedestrian or and residential friendly along that main drag. Any other questions? All right, we have an available motion before us for consideration. Blair, do you mind jumping back to?
Sure. I'll help you out.
Oh,
There it
thank
is.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, went too far.
Thanks.
Team effort
From the
tonight.
draw. Good.
Yeah.
I make the motion for favorable recommendation for petition 0567-2024 as presented.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor? Aye. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you,
too.
everyone.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.